My name is Sarah Martinez, and I used to believe that keeping everyone happy was the key to a successful marriage. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our Napa Valley suite at the Auberge du Soleil, casting golden rays across the marble floors. I stood there in my silk robe, watching the vineyard stretch endlessly toward the mountains, trying to calm the knot in my stomach. Today was supposed to be perfect. I had spent 6 months planning this corporate retreat for my husband David's tech company, and everything had to go flawlessly. "Sarah, where's my navy tie?" David called from the walk-in closet, his voice carrying that familiar edge of impatience that had become more pronounced over our 5 years of marriage. "It's hanging with your suit," I replied, not turning away from the window. The morning air was crisp, typical for October in wine country, and I could see the catering staff already setting up for the welcome breakfast on the terrace below. "Found it," he said, emerging from the closet in his perfectly pressed khakis and polo shirt. At 32, David still had that boyish charm that had first attracted me during our Stanford MBA program, but lately, his smile seemed reserved for everyone except me. "Mom's already texting about breakfast. She wants to make sure you're not planning to wear anything too casual." I turned to face him, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. "I'm wearing the dress we picked out together last week. The navy one with the one that shows too much shoulder." He was looking at his phone now, scrolling through emails. "You know how she feels about that." Margaret Whitman Hayes, my mother-in-law, had opinions about everything I did, wore, said, or thought. She'd made it clear from day one that I wasn't the type of woman she'd envisioned for her precious son. Too emotional, too ethnic, too ambitious in the wrong ways. The fact that I'd kept my maiden name professionally had been a particular source of ongoing tension. "David, I'm 30 years old. I think I can dress myself appropriately for a business function." He looked up from his phone, his blue eyes cold. "Can you? Because last time we had dinner with the Johnsons, you spent the entire evening talking about your event planning business instead of asking about their daughter's wedding." Mom was mortified. The Johnson dinner. I remembered it differently. I remembered trying to contribute to the conversation, sharing my expertise when asked, only to be met with Margaret's pointed comments about how some people just can't help making everything about themselves. "I was answering their questions about venue selection," I said quietly. "They asked for my professional opinion. Look, Sarah, I don't want to fight about this. Today is crucial for the company. We have potential investors flying in from San Francisco, and the board will be watching everything. I need you to just blend in, be supportive. Can you do that for me?" Blend in, be supportive. Code words for don't be yourself. I walked to the dresser and picked up my jewelry box, selecting the pearl earrings Margaret had given me for my birthday. They weren't my style, but wearing them was easier than dealing with her passive-aggressive comments about my flashy taste in accessories. "Of course," I said, fastening the earrings. "I want this to be successful for you." David's expression softened slightly. He walked over and kissed my forehead, a gesture that used to make me feel cherished but now felt patronizing. "I know you do. That's why I married you. You're always in my corner, always in his corner." But who was in mine? An hour later, I stood in the hotel's main lobby watching Margaret hold court with the wives of David's colleagues. She was in her element, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her smile gracious but calculating. At 62, she commanded attention wherever she went, a skill honed through decades as the wife of a federal judge and mother to 3 successful children. "Sarah, darling, there you are," she said as I approached, her voice carrying that honey-sweet tone that always made my skin crawl. "I was just telling everyone about your little catering business." My little catering business. I ran a full-service event planning company with 12 employees and a client list that included Fortune 500 companies. But in Margaret's world, anything I accomplished was diminished with qualifiers like little or cute. "It's event planning, actually," I corrected gently, smiling at the other women. "We handle everything from corporate retreats like this one to charity galas and product launches." "Oh, how nice for you to have a hobby," said Patricia Wells, the CFO's wife, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that came from women who'd never worked a day in their lives. "I keep telling Charles I should find something to occupy my time, but with 3 kids and all our social obligations—" "It's not a hobby," I started, but Margaret smoothly interrupted. "Sarah's always been so industrious. Even when she was planning her own wedding, she couldn't help but turn it into a business networking opportunity. I kept telling David that most brides focus on being a bride, not running around with vendor contracts. The other women laughed and I felt my cheeks burn. Margaret had a talent for making my strengths sound like character flaws. My attention to detail became obsessiveness. My professional network became social climbing. My independence became selfishness. "Well, I think it's wonderful that you're so driven," said Elena Rodriguez, the head of HR. She was newer to the company, and I'd always appreciated her directness. "This retreat is beautifully organized. The staff has been raving about your coordination." "Thank you," I said, grateful for the support. "I really wanted to create something special for everyone." Margaret's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, well, I just hope all the details don't distract from the real purpose of this weekend. It's about building relationships, not showcasing other things. Other things. My work, my accomplishments, my worth as a human being." I excused myself and walked toward the terrace, needing air and space to breathe. The view from the hotel was stunning, rolling hills covered in grapevines that were just beginning to turn golden with the season. I'd chosen this location specifically because I knew it would impress the investors, and from the conversations I'd overheard this morning, it was working. "Beautiful choice, really," came a voice behind me. I turned to see James Morrison, the company's newest board member, approaching with a cup of coffee. He was in his mid-40s, with grey threading through his dark hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I've been to dozens of corporate events, and this is exceptional. The attention to detail is remarkable. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. That means a lot coming from you." "James, please." "And I mean it. The way you've coordinated with the hotel staff, the timing of everything, even the playlist during breakfast. It's clear you understand how to create an atmosphere that's both professional and relaxed. That's not easy to achieve." I felt tears prick my eyes at the genuine appreciation in his voice. It had been so long since someone had recognized my work without diminishing it. "I love what I do," I said simply. "When you can bring people together and create moments that matter, it feels like more than just work. That's obvious. Your passion shows in every detail." He paused, looking out at the vineyard. "I hope you're considering expanding your business. This kind of quality deserves a larger stage." Before I could respond, David appeared beside us, his arms sliding around my waist in a gesture that looked affectionate, but felt possessive. "There you are," he said to me, then turned to James with his biggest smile. "I hope my wife isn't bending your ear about her event planning. She gets a little carried away sometimes." I felt the familiar heat of embarrassment creep up my neck, but this time it was mixed with something else. Anger. "Actually," James said, his tone cooling slightly, "Sarah was being quite modest about her considerable talents. You're lucky to have such a skilled professional in the family." David's laugh was forced. "Oh, she's definitely skilled. Sometimes I wonder if she loves her work more than she loves me." The joke fell flat. James looked uncomfortable, and I wanted to disappear into the ground. This was David's pattern. Dismiss my accomplishments in public, then frame it as playful teasing when called out. "I should check on the lunch setup," I said quietly, extracting myself from David's arm. "Sarah, wait," David started, but I was already walking away. As I headed toward the restaurant, I caught a glimpse of Margaret watching from across the terrace, her expression satisfied. She'd seen the whole exchange, and I realized with a sinking heart that this was exactly what she'd hoped for. Another moment where I was put in my place, where David chose loyalty to his family's expectations over respect for his wife. The hotel staff greeted me warmly as I entered the restaurant. I'd been working closely with them for months, and they treated me like a colleague, not just another guest. It was a stark contrast to the dynamic I'd just left behind. "Mrs. Martinez," said Carlos, the banquet manager, "everything is ready for lunch. The wine pairings you selected are perfect with the menu. The sommelier was impressed by your choices." "Thank you, Carlos. I really appreciate how hard you've all worked to make this special." He smiled. "It's easy when someone knows what they're doing. You should be proud of what you've created here." Should be proud. But standing there in that beautiful restaurant, surrounded by the evidence of my hard work and creativity, all I could think about was David's dismissive words and Margaret's satisfied smile. How had I let myself become so small in my own life? The lunch service went perfectly. The locally sourced menu paired beautifully with the Napa Valley wines I'd selected, and the conversation flowed as smoothly as the Chardonnay. I moved between tables, checking on guests, ensuring everything ran seamlessly. This was my element, where I felt confident and capable, but even as I received compliments from the investors and board members, I couldn't shake the morning's interaction with David and Margaret. Their words echoed in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. "Sarah, could you come here for a moment?" Margaret's voice cut through my thoughts. She was standing near the window with a group of the senior executives' wives, her expression pleasant, but her eyes sharp. I approached the group, my professional smile firmly in place. "Is everything all right? Do you need anything?" "We were just discussing the afternoon activities," Margaret said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was about to deliver criticism disguised as concern. "Some of us are wondering if perhaps the wine tasting might be a bit much for a business event." My heart sank. The wine tasting was one of the highlights I'd planned, a chance for guests to experience the best of what Napa had to offer while providing natural conversation starters for networking. The sommelier I'd hired was one of the region's most respected experts. "I chose activities that would appeal to different interests," I said carefully. "There's also the spa tour for those who prefer that, and the nature walk through the vineyard. I wanted to make sure everyone had options." "Options are wonderful, dear," Patricia Wells chimed in, "but we wouldn't want anyone to think we're here to party rather than conduct business." "The wine industry is a significant part of the economic landscape here," I replied, feeling defensive but trying to keep my voice level. "Many of our guests have expressed interest in understanding the local market. It seemed like a natural fit." Margaret's smile grew tighter. "I'm sure your intentions were good, but sometimes what seems natural to one person might seem inappropriate to others. We just want to make sure we're presenting the right image." The right image. Always the right image. Never mind that I'd researched extensively, that I'd spoken with other event planners who'd worked with tech companies, that I'd carefully considered the balance between business and entertainment. Margaret had decided it was wrong, and that was that. "I could speak with the hotel about modifying the activities," I offered, hating how small my voice sounded. "Oh, that would be wonderful," Margaret said, her relief audible. "I knew you'd understand. We just want what's best for David's career." As the women drifted away, I stood there feeling like I'd been hollowed out. Every decision I'd made, every detail I'd agonized over, was being questioned and dismissed. And the worst part was that I was letting it happen. I found myself walking toward the hotel's business center, needing a quiet space to think. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, and I could hear the distant sound of laughter from the terrace, where some guests were already gathering for the wine tasting that might not happen. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Jessica. "How's the fancy retreat going? Are you impressing everyone with your amazing skills?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Amazing skills? When had I stopped believing I had them? "It's complicated," I typed back. "Complicated how? Did something go wrong with the event?" "No, the event is fine. It's everything else." My phone rang immediately. Jessica didn't do subtle. "Okay, spill," she said without preamble. "What's going on?" "I can't really talk right now," I said, glancing around the empty business center. "I'm supposed to be working." "Sarah, you've been planning this thing for months. You told me it was going to be your showcase event, the one that would really establish your reputation with high-end corporate clients. What's complicated about that?" I sank into one of the leather chairs, suddenly exhausted. "Margaret thinks the wine tasting is inappropriate. She's making me feel like I've planned some kind of frat party instead of a sophisticated networking event." "Margaret, the mother-in-law from hell." "Jess, no, I'm serious. Every time you talk about this woman, you sound like you're apologizing for existing. What does David say when she pulls this stuff?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. What did David say? Usually nothing. Or worse, he agreed with her. "He's focused on the business side of things," I said weakly. "That's not an answer, and you know it. Sarah, you're one of the most talented event planners I know. You've organized everything from tech conferences to celebrity weddings. Why are you letting these people make you question yourself?" I closed my eyes, feeling tears threaten. "Because I love him, Jess. I love David, and I want his family to accept me. I want to be the wife he needs." "But what about the wife you need to be for yourself?" Before I could answer, the business center door opened and James Morrison walked in, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was in here. I was looking for a quiet place to make some calls." "Jess, I have to go," I said into the phone. "I'll call you later." "Don't let them diminish you, Sarah. You're worth more than that." I hung up and looked at James, who was studying me with concern. "Is everything all right? You look upset." I quickly wiped at my eyes, hoping my mascara wasn't smudged. I'm fine, just coordinating some last-minute changes to the afternoon activities. He sat down in the chair across from me, setting his phone aside. Changes? But everything's been perfect so far. What needs to be changed? I hesitated, not wanting to voice the criticism that had been leveled at my planning. Some concerns were raised about the appropriateness of the wine tasting for a business event. James frowned. Appropriateness? We're in Napa Valley. Wine is the local industry. It would be stranger not to include it. He paused, studying my face. Who raised these concerns? It doesn't matter. I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable. Sarah. His voice was gentle but firm. In my experience, when someone says their concerns don't matter, it usually means they matter a great deal. What's really going on here? I looked at this man, this board member who had more power in David's company than anyone except the CEO, and I realized I was at a crossroads. I could continue to smile and deflect and pretend everything was fine, or I could tell the truth. My mother-in-law and some of the other wives think the wine tasting sends the wrong message, I said quietly. They're concerned about the company's image. And what do you think? The question caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had asked what I thought about my own event? I think, I said slowly, that I spent 6 months researching and planning this retreat. I think I consulted with other event professionals and reviewed similar corporate events. I think I chose activities that would provide networking opportunities while showcasing the unique aspects of this region. And I think the wine tasting, led by a respected sommelier, is both educational and appropriate for our audience. James smiled. That's what I think too. In fact, I was looking forward to it. I've been reading about sustainable viticulture practices, and I heard your sommelier is an expert in that area. He is. That's actually why I chose him. I thought the sustainability angle would appeal to the tech crowd. It does. At least it appeals to this member of the tech crowd. He leaned forward. Sarah, can I ask you something? How long have you been second-guessing your professional judgment? The question hit like a physical blow. I don't second-guess. You do. I've been watching you all day. You check and recheck things that are already perfect. You defer to people who know less than you do about event planning. You apologize for decisions that are actually excellent. That's not the behavior of someone who trusts their own expertise. I stared at him, feeling exposed. I just want everyone to be happy. But what about you? Are you happy? The simple question opened something inside me that I'd been keeping locked away. Was I happy? When was the last time I'd felt genuine joy, satisfaction, pride in my work without immediately worrying about whether it was good enough for someone else's standards? I used to be, I said quietly. I used to love this work. I used to feel confident about my abilities. What changed? Before I could answer, the door burst open and David walked in, his face flushed with irritation. There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. We need to talk about these afternoon activities. Mom is concerned that... He stopped when he saw James. Oh, Mr. Morrison, I didn't realize you were in a meeting. We're not in a meeting, James said calmly. I was just telling Sarah how impressed I am with the quality of this event. She's done exceptional work. David's expression shifted, his business smile sliding into place. She certainly has. Sarah's always been very thorough. Another word that sounded like praise but felt like criticism. More than thorough, James said. Professional, creative, sophisticated. You're lucky to have such a talented wife. I am, David agreed, but his eyes were on me, and I could see the warning there. Don't embarrass me. Don't make this difficult. Actually, James continued, I was hoping to discuss the possibility of Sarah handling some events for the company. We have a product launch coming up that could benefit from her expertise. I felt my heart skip. A product launch for David's company would be a major account, the kind of client that could transform my business. That's very kind of you to suggest, David said quickly. But Sarah's pretty busy with her existing clients. I wouldn't want her to overextend herself. I could handle it, I said, finding my voice. I'd love to discuss the possibilities. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We can talk about it later. Right now we need to address these concerns about this afternoon. What concerns? James asked, his tone cooling. Some of the wives are worried that a wine tasting might send the wrong message to the investors, David explained. We want to maintain a professional atmosphere. James was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. David, I've been in this business for 20 years. I've attended corporate events all over the world. This retreat is one of the most well-planned, professionally executed events I've ever experienced. The wine tasting is an appropriate and thoughtful way to incorporate the local culture while providing networking opportunities. If anyone has concerns about professionalism, I'd suggest they examine their own assumptions rather than questioning Sarah's judgment. The silence that followed was deafening. David's face had gone pale, and I could see him struggling to find a response that wouldn't offend a board member while still maintaining his position. "Of course," he finally said. "I'm sure it will be fine. I just wanted to check." "Good," James said, standing. "I'm looking forward to it." He turned to me. "Sarah, thank you for creating such a wonderful experience for all of us. Don't let anyone convince you to change what's already perfect." After he left, David and I stood in the silence of the business center, the weight of what had just happened settling between us. "What the hell was that?" David asked, his voice low and angry. "What was what?" "You know what? Undermining me in front of a board member, making me look like an idiot." "I didn't undermine you. I defended my professional decisions." "Your professional decisions. Sarah, this is my career we're talking about. My company, my reputation, and my event. My work, my reputation." He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Since when do you care more about your little business than about supporting me?" There it was again. My little business, my little dreams, my little worth. "Since I realized that supporting you has meant diminishing myself," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. David's expression hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired of apologizing for being good at what I do. I'm tired of pretending my work doesn't matter. I'm tired of letting your mother treat me like an embarrassment. My mother loves you. Your mother tolerates me at best. And you let her. That's not—" "It is true, David, and you know it." We stood there facing each other, 5 years of unspoken resentment suddenly hanging in the air between us. I could see the exact moment when David decided to retreat rather than engage, his face closing off in the way it always did when conversations got too real. "Look, I don't want to fight about this now. We have guests to think about. Can we just get through the rest of the day without any more drama?" Without any more drama. As if standing up for myself was creating drama rather than addressing problems that had been festering for years. "Fine," I said. "We'll get through the day." But as I watched him leave, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The carefully constructed facade of our marriage had developed cracks, and I wasn't sure I wanted to keep patching them up anymore. The wine tasting was a resounding success. The sommelier I'd hired, Marcus Chen, was everything I'd hoped for: knowledgeable, engaging, and passionate about sustainable viticulture. He led the group through a carefully curated selection of local wines, explaining not just the flavor profiles, but the innovative farming techniques being used to combat climate change in the region. I watched from the edge of the group as guests hung on his every word, asking thoughtful questions and making connections between the wine industry and their own businesses. James Morrison was particularly engaged, discussing how the sustainability practices could be applied to tech manufacturing. Even some of the wives who had been skeptical earlier were now enthusiastically participating, but Margaret wasn't among them. She stood apart from the group, her arms crossed, occasionally checking her phone with obvious displeasure. Every few minutes she'd catch my eye and give me a look that clearly communicated her disapproval. I tried to ignore her, focusing instead on the success of the event, but her presence was like a dark cloud on an otherwise perfect afternoon. "This is fascinating," said Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the head of the company's research division. She approached me with a glass of Pinot Noir, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. I had no idea about the parallels between vineyard management and sustainable tech development. This was such a clever way to spark these conversations. "Thank you," I said, feeling a genuine smile cross my face for the first time all day. I was hoping it would provide some unexpected connections. It absolutely has. I've already exchanged cards with 3 people I probably wouldn't have had substantive conversations with otherwise. She paused, studying me. "You know, we're launching a new green technology initiative next quarter. We could really use someone with your skills to help with the events and presentations." "Have you ever worked in the tech sustainability space?" My heart raced. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been hoping for, a chance to expand my business into new sectors. "I'd love to learn more about it," I said. "I've been following the developments in sustainable technology, and I think there are some really innovative ways to present that kind of information to both industry professionals and the general public." "Perfect. Let me give you my card, and we can set up a meeting next week to discuss specifics." As Dr. Walsh handed me her business card, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Margaret standing behind me, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Sarah, dear, could I have a word? Privately?" Dr. Walsh excused herself, and I followed Margaret to a quiet corner of the terrace, my stomach knotting with apprehension. "I think we need to discuss your behavior today," Margaret began, her voice low but venomous. "This little display of yours is becoming quite embarrassing." "I'm sorry, what display?" "Don't play dumb with me. The way you've been networking, collecting business cards, turning David's corporate retreat into your personal job fair, it's inappropriate, and frankly, desperate." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "I've been doing my job, Margaret. When people express interest in my services, it would be unprofessional not to respond. Your job is to support your husband, not to use his connections to advance your own agenda." "My own agenda?" I could hear my voice rising and forced myself to lower it. "My agenda is running a successful business that I built from the ground up." Margaret's laugh was cold. "Oh, please. You run a party planning service. Let's not pretend it's some kind of corporate empire." "I run a full-service event planning company with corporate clients across 3 states, I said through gritted teeth. "I have 12 employees and you have a husband whose career actually matters," Margaret interrupted. "A husband who needs a wife who understands her role, not someone who's constantly trying to prove she's more important than she is." The words hit like a slap. More important than she is. As if my worth was predetermined, as if my dreams and ambitions were inherently less valuable than David's. "What exactly do you think my role should be?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "To be a proper wife, to support David's career, to blend in at events like this instead of making yourself the center of attention, to think about what's best for the family instead of what's best for Sarah. And if what's best for me is also what's best for our family?" Margaret's expression turned pitying. "Oh, sweetheart, you really don't understand, do you? This isn't about what's best for you. It never has been. David married you because he thought you'd grow out of this phase, this need to be somebody. He thought you'd settle down and focus on what really matters. Which is being Mrs. David Hayes, of course, supporting his career, raising his children, maintaining his home, being the woman he needs you to be." I stared at this woman who had never worked a day in her life, who had built her entire identity around being someone's wife and mother, and I felt something crystallize inside me. This wasn't about appropriateness or professionalism, or even about David's career. This was about control, about keeping me small and manageable and grateful for whatever scraps of approval they chose to throw my way. "And if I don't want to be that woman?" I asked. Margaret's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the steel underneath. "Then you'll lose him, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself." She walked away, leaving me standing alone on the terrace, her words echoing in my head. "You'll lose him," as if David was a prize to be won or lost, rather than a partner who should value and respect me regardless of whether I fit into his mother's narrow definition of appropriate wifehood. I looked out at the vineyard, at the rows of vines that had been carefully tended and cultivated to produce something beautiful and valuable. The irony wasn't lost on me. These plants were prized for their complexity, their unique characteristics, their ability to reflect the specific conditions of their environment. But I was expected to be generic, interchangeable, willing to prune away any parts of myself that might be inconvenient. "Sarah," David's voice came from behind me. I turned to see him approaching, his expression cautious. "Everything okay? You look upset. Your mother just informed me that my role in this marriage is to be Mrs. David Hayes and nothing else." David's face went through several expressions before settling on resigned irritation. "What did she say exactly? Does it matter? She's right, isn't she? That's what you want too. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you introduced me as Sarah Martinez, the event planner? When was the last time you talked about my accomplishments without diminishing them? When was the last time you stood up for me when your mother was being cruel?" David ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing but now recognized as his way of avoiding difficult conversations. "Look, I know my mother can be intense, but she means well. She just wants what's best for our family. What's best for your family, there's a difference. You are my family, Sarah. You're my wife. Am I? Because most of the time I feel like I'm just an accessory to your life, present when needed, invisible when convenient. That's not true. Then why didn't you support me when James Morrison offered me work? Why did you immediately assume I couldn't handle it?" David's jaw tightened. "Because I know how you get when you're stressed. You become obsessive, you work all hours, you forget about everything else. I was trying to protect you. From what? From success? From opportunities? From having a career that matters? From overextending yourself and then falling apart when you can't handle it all. The words hung between us like a verdict. In David's mind, I wasn't someone to be supported and encouraged. I was someone to be managed and protected from my own limitations. I see, I said quietly. So in your expert opinion, I'm too weak to handle success. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I turned away from him, looking back out at the vineyard. David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. If I had been born into your mother's world, if I had her background and her advantages and her connections, would you still think I was too weak to handle a successful career? The pause before his answer told me everything I needed to know. Sarah, that's not a fair question. It's a perfectly fair question, and your inability to answer it is an answer in itself. Look, I don't want to fight about this anymore. We have guests, we have responsibilities. We have guests at an event that I planned and executed flawlessly, I interrupted. An event that's been praised by everyone who attended, an event that's opened doors for me professionally. And instead of being proud of me, you're standing here telling me I'm not strong enough to walk through those doors. I am proud of you. No, you're not. You're embarrassed by me. You're embarrassed that I have ambitions beyond being your wife. You're embarrassed that I'm good at what I do. You're embarrassed that people notice me for reasons that have nothing to do with you. David's face flushed red. That's ridiculous. Is it? Then why does every compliment I receive come with a qualifier from you? Why does every opportunity I'm offered get met with reasons why I can't handle it? Why do you consistently side with your mother when she criticizes me? I don't side with her. You absolutely do every single time, and I've been making excuses for it because I love you and I want this marriage to work. But I'm starting to realize that you don't want a marriage, David. You want ownership. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they felt true in a way that made my chest ache. David stared at me like I'd struck him. How can you say that? Everything I do is for us, for our future together. Everything you do is for your version of our future, the version where I'm grateful to exist in the margins of your life, where my dreams don't matter as much as your comfort, where I'm small enough to fit into the box your mother built for me. Sarah, you're being dramatic. I'm being honest, finally. Before David could respond, we were interrupted by the sound of someone clearing their throat. We turned to see Carlos, the banquet manager, approaching with an apologetic expression. Mrs. Martinez, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation I need to discuss with you. Could we speak privately for a moment? I welcomed the interruption, needing space from the intensity of the conversation with David. Of course. David, we'll continue this later. As I followed Carlos toward the hotel entrance, I could feel David's eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. I was emotionally drained and needed a moment to collect myself before dealing with whatever crisis had arisen. What's the situation? I asked once we were out of earshot. Carlos looked uncomfortable. There's been a complaint about the wine tasting. A guest spoke with the hotel manager and requested that we shut it down immediately. My heart sank. Who complained? I'm not supposed to say, but he glanced around to make sure we weren't overheard. It was Mrs. Hayes, the older woman with the silver hair. She told our manager that the event was inappropriate and that she was speaking on behalf of the group. Margaret, of course it was Margaret. She claimed that several guests were uncomfortable and wanted the wine tasting to end. Carlos continued. Our manager is new and doesn't know the full situation, so he asked me to handle it. But Mrs. Martinez, I've been watching that wine tasting, and everyone seems to be having a wonderful time. I'm confused about what the problem actually is. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the entire day settling on my shoulders. Margaret hadn't been content to just criticize me privately. She'd gone behind my back to try to sabotage the event entirely. Carlos, who is the paying client for this event? I asked. You are, Mrs. Martinez. Your company has the contract with us. And the wine tasting was part of the original agreement? Yes, absolutely. It was one of the key elements you specifically requested. I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me. For months I'd been allowing Margaret to undermine me, allowing David to dismiss me, allowing everyone to treat my professional judgment as irrelevant. But this was my event, my contract, my reputation on the line. Then the wine tasting continues as planned, I said firmly. If Mrs. Hayes has concerns, she can address them with me directly. But she doesn't have the authority to make changes to an event she didn't plan and isn't paying for. Carlos looked relieved. Should I inform our manager of this decision? Yes. And Carlos, in the future, any changes to my events need to come through me directly. I'm the client contact, not any of the guests. Understood, Mrs. Martinez. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call. That wine tasting is exactly the kind of sophisticated touch that makes events memorable. As Carlos headed back inside, I stood in the hotel lobby, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. Margaret's attempt to sabotage my event had backfired because it had finally shown me exactly what I was dealing with. This wasn't about appropriateness or professionalism. This was about a woman who couldn't stand to see me succeed and a husband who was too weak or too comfortable to defend me. I walked back toward the terrace where the wine tasting was continuing without interruption. The guests were engaged and happy, the sommelier was in his element, and the networking was flowing as naturally as the wine. This was what I'd envisioned, what I'd worked for months to create. As I approached the group, I saw Margaret standing off to the side, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low but agitated. She was facing away from me, but I could catch fragments of her conversation. Told the hotel manager explicitly, completely inappropriate, embarrassing David in front of, doesn't understand her place. I stood there listening, feeling a cold anger build in my chest. She was talking to someone about me, probably one of her friends, spinning the story to make me the villain and herself the victim. Never should have married her. Always knew she was wrong for him. Too ethnic, too pushy, doesn't know how to be a proper wife. Too ethnic. The words hit me like a physical blow. In all the years of Margaret's subtle put-downs and passive-aggressive comments, she'd never been quite that explicit about her real problem with me. But there it was, the ugly truth underneath all the talk about appropriateness and professionalism. I walked away before I could hear more, not trusting myself to remain civil if I confronted her in that moment. Instead, I found myself heading toward the hotel's concierge desk, an idea forming in my mind. "Excuse me," I said to the woman behind the desk. "I need to make some changes to the arrangements for some of my guests." "Of course, Mrs. Martinez. What can I help you with?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the information I was looking for. Margaret and her husband were staying in one of the hotel's premium suites, an upgrade I'd arranged as a courtesy when booking their room. They also had VIP access to the spa, priority restaurant reservations, and late checkout privileges. "I need to modify the reservations for Mr. and Mrs. Hayes in the Vineyard Suite," I said. "They'll need to be moved to a standard room, and I'd like to remove their VIP privileges." The concierge looked confused. "Is there a problem with their current accommodations?" "Let's just say there's been a change in circumstances," I said. "They're no longer VIP guests. I'll need to check with my manager about making those changes mid-stay." "Here's my contract number," I said, writing it down for her. "This is my event, and I'm the client paying for these accommodations. I have the authority to make modifications as needed." The concierge nodded and began typing on her computer. "It may take an hour or two to coordinate the room change, but I can remove the VIP privileges immediately." "That's perfect, thank you." As I walked away from the concierge desk, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and anxiety. I'd never done anything so direct, so confrontational. Part of me wondered if I was making a mistake, if I was letting my anger drive me to do something I'd regret. But a larger part of me felt liberated. For the first time in my marriage, I'd stood up for myself in a concrete way. I'd drawn a line and enforced it. I returned to the wine tasting, where Marcus was explaining the terroir of a particularly complex Cabernet blend. The guests were completely engaged, and I could see business cards being exchanged around the group. Dr. Walsh caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up, indicating her continued enthusiasm for our potential collaboration. This was my work. This was what I was good at, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not Margaret, not David, not anyone, convince me that it didn't matter. An hour later, as the wine tasting was winding down, I saw Margaret hurrying across the terrace toward David, her face flushed with indignation. Even from a distance, I could see she was upset about something. I had a pretty good idea what. I watched as she pulled David aside, speaking to him in urgent, hushed tones. His expression grew increasingly alarmed as she talked, and more than once he glanced in my direction. I continued chatting with the guests, accepting compliments on the event, while keeping one eye on the drama unfolding across the terrace. After a few minutes, David broke away from his mother and strode toward me, his jaw set in the way that meant he was barely containing his anger. "Sarah, we need to talk, now." I excused myself from the conversation I'd been having with one of the investors and followed David to the same quiet corner where I'd had my confrontation with Margaret earlier. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, his voice low but furious. I'm going to need you to be more specific. You know exactly what I'm talking about. My mother was just informed by the hotel that she's being moved to a different room and that her VIP privileges have been revoked. They told her the changes were requested by the event coordinator. I met his gaze steadily. That's correct. Are you out of your mind? You can't just arbitrarily change people's hotel arrangements because you're having some kind of tantrum. It wasn't arbitrary and it wasn't a tantrum. Your mother went behind my back to try to sabotage my event. She lied to the hotel staff, claiming she had authority to make changes to an event she neither planned nor paid for. That's unprofessional and unacceptable. David's face was turning red. So you decided to humiliate her in front of everyone? I decided to enforce appropriate boundaries. She's welcome to attend my event as a guest, but she doesn't get VIP treatment after trying to undermine me professionally. She's my mother, Sarah. She's family. And I'm your wife. Or am I supposed to rank lower than your mother in your hierarchy of loyalty? That's not what this is about. That's exactly what this is about. Your mother has been attacking me all day, questioning my professional judgment, making racist comments about me being too ethnic, and you've said nothing. Nothing, David. You've let her treat me like I'm some kind of embarrassment to your family. David's expression shifted slightly. She didn't say you were too ethnic. I heard her on the phone 20 minutes ago. She was telling someone that you never should have married me because I'm too ethnic and too pushy and don't know how to be a proper wife. The silence that followed was deafening. David opened and closed his mouth several times, but no words came out. You knew, I said quietly, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. You knew she felt that way about me. Sarah, it's not, she doesn't mean, she absolutely means it. And you've known all along. I stared at this man I'd been married to for 5 years, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. How long, David? How long have you known that your mother thinks I'm inferior because of my ethnicity? It's not about your ethnicity. Don't lie to me, not now. How long? He ran his hand through his hair again, looking everywhere except at me. She made some comments before we got engaged, but I told her she was wrong, that you were perfect for me. Some comments. What kind of comments? Sarah, this isn't helping anything. What kind of comments, David? He sighed heavily. She said you were too different from our family, that you came from a different background and might not fit in with our social circle. She was worried about cultural differences. Cultural differences, the euphemism that bigots used when they didn't want to admit they were being racist. And what did you say when she made these comments? I told her she was wrong. I told her that you were smart and successful and that I loved you. But you didn't tell her that her comments were racist and unacceptable. I tried to focus on the positive. You tried to focus on the positive, I repeated slowly. Instead of telling your mother that her prejudice was wrong, you tried to convince her that I was acceptable despite my ethnicity. That's not how I meant it. But that's how it was, wasn't it? You never challenged her fundamental assumption that my background made me less suitable as your wife. You just tried to prove that I was good enough to overcome that disadvantage. David's silence was answer enough. I stood there looking at this man I'd loved, this man I'd tried so hard to please, and I felt something break inside me. It wasn't just disappointment or anger. It was grief for the marriage I thought we had, for the person I thought he was. Sarah, I know this looks bad, but you have to understand. I understand perfectly. I understand that you've spent 5 years letting your mother treat me like a second-class citizen because deep down, part of you agrees with her. I understand that when you married me, you thought you were doing me a favor, lifting me up to your level. I understand that you've never seen me as your equal. That's not true. It is true, and the sad part is, I believed you when you told me you loved me. I believed you when you said we were partners. I believed you when you promised to forsake all others and cleave to me. But your mother has always come first, hasn't she? Her comfort, her approval, her feelings. She's my mother, Sarah. I can't just cut her out of my life. I never asked you to cut her out of your life. I asked you to stand up for me, to defend me, to make it clear that disrespecting your wife was unacceptable. But you couldn't do that, could you? Because it would have meant choosing me over her, and you were never willing to make that choice. We stood there in the late afternoon sun, the sounds of the successful wine tasting continuing in the background, and I realized that our marriage had been over for a long time. I'd just been too invested in the fantasy to see it. What happens now? David asked quietly. Before I could answer, James Morrison appeared beside us, looking concerned. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure everything was all right. There seems to be some kind of commotion, and I heard raised voices. David straightened up, his public persona sliding back into place. Everything's fine, Mr. Morrison. Just a small misunderstanding about hotel arrangements. James looked skeptical, his gaze moving between David and me. Sarah, are you all right? You look upset. I appreciated his concern, but I wasn't about to air my marital problems in front of David's board member, no matter how sympathetic he seemed. I'm fine, thank you. Just dealing with some logistics. Actually, James said, I was hoping to catch both of you. I've been talking with some of the other board members about Sarah's work on this retreat. We're all incredibly impressed, and we'd like to discuss hiring her company for several upcoming events. I felt my heart skip. This was the opportunity I'd been hoping for, the chance to establish my business with major corporate clients. That's very generous of you, David said quickly, but as I mentioned earlier, Sarah's schedule is pretty full. Actually, I interrupted, I'd be very interested in discussing that opportunity. David shot me a warning look, but I ignored him. I was done letting him speak for me, done letting him make decisions about my career. Excellent, James said. Why don't we set up a meeting for next week? We have a product launch in December that could really benefit from your expertise, and there are several other events in the pipeline. I'd love that, I said, pulling out my business card. Here's my direct contact information. James pocketed the card with a smile. Perfect. I'll have my assistant call you Monday to set something up. He turned to David. You're lucky to have such a talented wife, David. I hope you appreciate what a gem you have. After James walked away, David and I stood in uncomfortable silence. I can't believe you just did that, he said finally. Did what? Accepted a business opportunity? Undermined me in front of a board member. Again, I didn't undermine you. I made my own decision about my own business. Your business that exists because of my connections. My business that exists because I'm good at what I do, I corrected. Your connections opened some doors, but I'm the one who walked through them and proved myself. David's phone buzzed and he glanced at it with a frown. It's my mother. She's asking me to come to her room. She's very upset about the hotel situation. Then you should go comfort her. Sarah, about the room thing, maybe you could reconsider. As a gesture of goodwill. I stared at him in disbelief. Even after everything we'd just discussed, even after the revelation about his mother's racism and his failure to defend me, he was still asking me to accommodate her. No, David, I won't reconsider. Your mother tried to sabotage my professional event. She lied to hotel staff and attempted to exercise authority she doesn't have. Those actions have consequences. She's family, and I'm your wife, or I was. The words came out before I'd fully processed the thought, but once they were spoken, I realized they felt true. David went very still. What do you mean, you were? I mean, I can't do this anymore. I can't be married to someone who sees me as less than equal. I can't be married to someone who won't defend me from his family's racism. I can't be married to someone who's embarrassed by my success. Sarah, you're being dramatic. Every marriage has problems. This isn't a marriage, David. This is me trying to fit myself into a box you and your mother built for me, and I'm done trying to make myself smaller to fit. So, what are you saying? You want a divorce? The word hung in the air between us like a challenge. 6 months ago, the thought would have terrified me. Now it felt like a door opening. I'm saying I want a partner who sees me as an equal. I want someone who's proud of my accomplishments instead of threatened by them. I want someone who will stand up for me when his family attacks me. And if you can't be that person, then yes, maybe we should talk about divorce. David's face went through several emotions before settling on something that looked like panic. Sarah, you can't be serious. We can work through this. We can go to counseling, can we? Because that would require you to admit that there's something to work through. And based on this conversation, I don't think you see the problem. I see the problem. I see that my mother has been difficult. Difficult? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. David, your mother called me too ethnic. She tried to sabotage my professional event. She spent 5 years making it clear that she thinks I'm beneath your family. That's not difficult, that's abusive. She doesn't mean... Stop. Just stop defending her. The fact that your first instinct is still to make excuses for her tells me everything I need to know. David's phone buzzed again and he glanced at it reflexively. Go, I said. Go comfort your mother. Make sure she's okay. Fix whatever hotel inconvenience I've caused her. Put her needs first, like you always do. Sarah, I'm done with this conversation, David. I have an event to finish hosting. I walked away, leaving him standing there with his phone in his hand, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe properly. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of professional competence and personal revelation. I moved through the farewell dinner I'd planned with practiced ease, ensuring every detail was perfect while my marriage crumbled quietly in the background. David and Margaret were notably absent from most of the dinner, though I occasionally caught glimpses of them huddled together in intense conversation. The other guests didn't seem to notice their absence, too engaged in the conversations and connections that had formed throughout the day. "Sarah, this has been extraordinary," Dr. Walsh said as the evening wound down. "I've been to dozens of corporate events, and this is hands down the most successful I've ever attended. The way you've woven together business and pleasure created opportunities for both professional networking and personal connection. It's really masterful." "Thank you," I said, meaning it deeply. "That's exactly what I was hoping to achieve. I meant what I said earlier about our green technology initiative. I'd love to have you involved from the ground up. We're looking at a series of events over the next year, everything from investor presentations to public awareness campaigns. It's exactly the kind of forward-thinking work that needs someone with your vision." I felt a flutter of excitement, the first genuinely positive emotion I'd experienced all day. I'd be honored to be part of that. "Perfect. I'll send you the preliminary information on Monday, and we can schedule a deeper conversation." She paused, looking at me with concern. "Are you all right? You seem a bit stressed." I glanced around the dining room, where guests were finishing their dessert and coffee, the conversation flowing as smoothly as the wine. This event, my event, had been an unqualified success, but the personal cost had been higher than I'd anticipated. "Just tired," I said. "It's been a long day." Dr. Walsh nodded understandingly. "The best events always are, but this one will be remembered for a long time. You should be very proud." Proud? When was the last time someone had told me I should be proud of my work without immediately following it with qualifications or concerns? After the guests began retiring to their rooms, I found myself alone in the hotel lobby, finally able to drop the professional mask I'd been wearing all evening. The exhaustion hit me like a wave, not just physical tiredness, but emotional depletion from hours of managing my public face while my private world fell apart. I was sitting in one of the leather chairs staring out at the dark vineyard when James Morrison approached. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "You look like you could use some company." I gestured to the chair beside me. "It's been quite a day." "It has indeed, and you handled it all with remarkable grace." He settled into the chair and was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've been in business long enough to recognize when someone is dealing with more than just professional stress. Are you okay?" The kindness in his voice nearly undid me. I'd been holding myself together through sheer force of will, but his genuine concern made my carefully constructed composure waver. "I'm having some personal difficulties," I said carefully, "but they don't affect my professional capabilities. I never thought they did. If anything, watching you manage today's challenges while maintaining such high standards has been impressive, but everyone needs support sometimes, even the most capable people." I looked at this man who barely knew me, but who had shown me more respect and encouragement in one day than my own husband had in months. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "When you look at me, what do you see?" He seemed surprised by the question. "What do I see? I see a highly skilled professional who's created something remarkable here. I see someone with vision and attention to detail and the ability to manage complex logistics while never losing sight of the human element. I see someone who's built a successful business through talent and hard work." He paused. "Why do you ask?" "Because I'm starting to realize that's not how everyone sees me." "Then they're not looking hard enough," he said simply. "Sarah, in my experience, there are two types of people in this world. Those who build others up and those who tear them down. The ones who tear others down usually do it because seeing someone else succeed makes them feel small about their own limitations. And the ones who build others up, they understand that someone else's success doesn't diminish their own. They know that lifting others up ultimately benefits everyone." I thought about David's reaction to my professional opportunities, about Margaret's constant criticism, about the way they both seemed threatened by my accomplishments rather than proud of them. "What if the people who are supposed to support you are the ones tearing you down?" I asked. James was quiet for a long moment. "That's one of the hardest situations anyone can face, but ultimately, you have a choice. You can keep trying to win approval from people who are determined not to give it, or you can surround yourself with people who appreciate your worth. That sounds easier than it is. It is easier said than done, but consider this. You've built a successful business. You've created this incredible event. You've impressed everyone here today. You did all of that despite having people in your life who were actively discouraging you. Imagine what you could accomplish if you had people who were actively supporting you instead." His words settled into something deep inside me, a part of myself I'd forgotten existed, the part that had dreams and ambitions and believed I was capable of achieving them. James, can I ask you another question about the business opportunities you mentioned? Of course. Are you offering them to me because you feel sorry for me, or because you genuinely think I'm qualified? He looked genuinely taken aback. Sarah, I'm offering them to you because you're the most qualified event coordinator I've encountered in years. This retreat alone would be enough to convince me, but I also did my research. I looked up your company, read testimonials from your clients, reviewed photos from your events. You're not just qualified, you're exceptional. I felt tears prick my eyes at his straightforward assessment. No qualifications, no diminishments, just honest professional recognition. Thank you, I said quietly. I needed to hear that. I suspect you need to hear it more often than you do. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the occasional car wind its way through the hills toward the hotel. Sarah, James said eventually, I hope you don't mind me offering some unsolicited advice. Please, don't let anyone convince you that you have to choose between being successful professionally and being loved personally. The right people will celebrate your success, not feel threatened by it. And if the people in my life can't do that, then maybe they're not the right people. After James said goodnight and headed to his room, I remained in the lobby, processing everything that had happened. My phone had been buzzing periodically with texts from David, but I hadn't looked at them. I wasn't ready for whatever combination of anger, manipulation, and false reconciliation they contained. Instead, I pulled up my contacts and called Jessica. Sarah, how did the big event go? I've been dying to hear... She stopped mid-sentence. What's wrong? You sound terrible. The event was perfect, I said. My marriage is over. There was a brief silence. Then Jessica's voice, gentle but unsurprised. Do you want to tell me what happened? I told her everything. The wine-tasting controversy, Margaret's racism, David's failure to defend me, the hotel room situation, the business opportunities, the conversation about divorce. Jessica listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy or outrage. Oh, honey, she said when I finished. I'm so sorry you're going through this, but I have to tell you something. I'm not surprised. You're not? Sarah, I've been watching you disappear for years. Every time I've seen you, you've seemed smaller, less confident, less like yourself. I kept hoping you'd realize what was happening, but I didn't know how to bring it up without seeming like I was attacking your marriage. You could have said something. Could I? Because every time I even hinted that David or his mother were being unfair to you, you defended them. You had explanations for everything, justifications for why their behavior was actually reasonable. I thought back to countless conversations where Jessica had gently questioned David's dismissiveness or Margaret's criticism, and how I'd reflexively jumped to their defense. I was trying to make it work, I said. I know you were, and that's what makes this so hard. You put everything into trying to be the wife they wanted you to be, and they couldn't even appreciate the effort. So what do I do now? Now you remember who you were before you started trying to shrink yourself to fit their expectations. You remember that you're brilliant and talented and deserving of respect. You remember that you built a successful business while dealing with people who were actively undermining your confidence. I'm scared, Jess. 5 years of marriage, and now I'm looking at starting over. You're not starting over, Sarah. You're starting fresh. There's a difference. You're not going back to square one. You're building on everything you've learned and accomplished, just without the dead weight holding you back. Dead weight. It was harsh but accurate. David and Margaret had become anchors dragging me down, rather than sails helping me move forward. What if I'm making a mistake? What if I'm throwing away something good because I'm being too prideful? Sarah, listen to me. A good marriage doesn't require you to make yourself smaller. A good partner doesn't feel threatened by your success. A good family doesn't tolerate racism against one of their own members. You're not throwing away something good. You're refusing to accept something that was slowly destroying you. After I hung up with Jessica, I finally looked at the texts from David. They were a predictable progression from anger to bargaining to self-pity. This is insane. We need to talk rationally about this. My mother is devastated. She's crying in her room because of what you did. I know we have problems, but divorce isn't the answer. We can work through this. Sarah, please, I love you. Don't throw away 5 years over one bad day. One bad day. As if 5 years of accumulated slights and dismissals could be reduced to a single bad day. I turned off my phone and went up to our suite, where I spent the night on the couch, staring out at the vineyard and thinking about the future I wanted to build. The next morning I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The sun was streaming through the windows of our suite, and I could hear the sounds of the hotel coming to life below. David was still asleep in the bedroom, and I was grateful for the quiet moment to collect my thoughts. I made coffee and sat on the terrace, looking out at the vineyard where just yesterday I'd been questioning everything about my life. Today, those same vines looked different to me. They looked like possibility. My phone rang and I was surprised to see Dr. Walsh's name on the screen. "I hope I'm not calling too early," she said when I answered. "I wanted to catch you before you left the hotel." "Not too early at all. What can I do for you?" "Actually, I was hoping to do something for you. I've been thinking about our conversation last night, and I have a proposition. What would you say to relocating your business to the Bay Area? We could offer you a significant contract as an anchor client, enough to justify the move and establish you in a new market." I felt my heart skip. The Bay Area, a fresh start in a city that valued innovation and entrepreneurship. "That's an incredible offer," I said. "Can I ask what prompted it?" "Honestly, I've been watching you this weekend, and I see someone with enormous talent who's been constrained by her current circumstances. I think a change of scenery might be exactly what you need to reach your full potential." Constrained by my current circumstances. It was a diplomatic way of saying what Jessica had been telling me for years. "I'd need some time to think about it," I said. "There are complications in my personal life that I'd need to resolve first." "Of course. But Sarah, don't let other people's limitations become your limitations. You're capable of much more than you're currently able to express." After we hung up, I sat there processing the magnitude of what she'd offered. A new city, new clients, a fresh start professionally and personally. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. "Sarah?" David's voice came from inside the suite. "Where are you?" "On the terrace," I called back. He appeared a few minutes later, looking haggard and uncertain. His hair was messy from sleep, and his eyes were red-rimmed like he'd been crying. "We need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "Yes, we do. I've been thinking all night about what you said yesterday, about the divorce, about my mother, about everything." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I don't want to lose you, Sarah. I love you. I know you do, David. But love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect. I do respect you." "No, you don't. You love me despite who I am, not because of who I am. You love the version of me that fits comfortably into your life, but you're uncomfortable with the parts of me that are independent and ambitious and successful." David was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe that's true," he said finally. "Maybe I have been trying to make you fit into a box." It was the first time he'd acknowledged the problem without deflecting or making excuses. "Why?" I asked. "Why couldn't you just let me be myself?" "Because," he ran his hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of frustration, "because my mother raised me to believe that marriages work best when there are clear roles, when everyone knows their place and stays in it. And my place was supposed to be supporting you, not competing with you." "I guess so, yes." "David, do you understand how that made me feel? How it made me feel to have my own husband treat my career like a hobby, to have my accomplishments dismissed or minimized? I'm starting to understand, and I'm sorry. I really am." I looked at this man I'd loved, who was finally beginning to see what he'd done, and I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the marriage we could have had if he'd been able to see this years ago. Relief that he was finally being honest about the dynamic between us. "I'm glad you're starting to understand," I said. "But David, I don't think understanding is enough at this point." "What do you mean?" "I mean that even if you change, even if you start supporting my career and standing up to your mother, I'm not sure I can trust that it's real. I'm not sure I can trust that you won't revert to the old patterns when it's convenient." "So you've already decided? About the divorce?" I thought about Dr. Walsh's offer, about the life I could build if I wasn't constantly fighting for basic respect in my own marriage. "I think I have," I said quietly. "David, I've been offered an opportunity to relocate my business to San Francisco. It's a chance to start fresh, both professionally and personally." His face went pale. "You're leaving? You're actually leaving?" "I think I need to. I think I need to find out who I am when I'm not trying to fit into someone else's expectations all the time." "But what about us? What about our marriage, our home, everything we've built together?" "David, what have we built together? Really? Because when I look at our marriage, I see me constantly trying to become smaller, while you stayed exactly the same. I see me making all the compromises, while you made all the demands. That's not fair, isn't it? Name one thing you've changed about yourself for our marriage. One way you've grown or adapted or compromised." David opened and closed his mouth several times, but no answer came. "I thought so," I said gently. "David, You fell in love with the idea of me, the potential of who I could become if I just tried hard enough to be what you needed. But I fell in love with who I thought you were, someone who would see me as an equal partner. I can change, he said desperately. I can stand up to my mother. I can support your career. Maybe you can. But I can't spend any more years of my life waiting to find out. I can't keep putting my dreams on hold while you figure out how to respect me. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 5 years settling between us. In the distance I could see other hotel guests enjoying their breakfast on the terrace, the normal world continuing while mine shifted on its axis. There's something else, David said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Something I need to tell you. I felt my stomach clench. What? My mother. She's been pressuring me for months to ask you to quit your business. She thinks it's affecting our marriage, making you too independent. She's been threatening to cut us out of the family trust if I don't bring you into line. The words hit me like ice water. The family trust? It's substantial. Enough to set us up for life, pay for our kids' education, everything. She's been using it as leverage. I stared at him, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed suddenly clicking into place. So when you've been discouraging my career, when you've been minimizing my success, it wasn't just about your comfort level. It was about money. It wasn't just about money, but it was partly about money. Your mother was bribing you to control me, and you went along with it. I thought I could handle both. I thought I could keep her happy while still supporting you. By keeping me small enough that she wouldn't feel threatened. By ensuring I never became successful enough to challenge her control over you. David's silence was confirmation enough. I stood up and walked to the edge of the terrace, gripping the railing as I processed this new information. Not only had my husband failed to defend me from his mother's racism and manipulation, he'd been financially incentivized to participate in it. Sarah, I know how this sounds, but you have to understand the pressure I've been under. No, I said, turning back to face him. I don't have to understand anything. You chose money over your wife. You chose your inheritance over my dignity. You chose your mother's approval over our marriage. It wasn't that simple. It was exactly that simple. Every time she criticized me and you said nothing, every time she undermined my work and you made excuses for her, every time you minimized my accomplishments, you were protecting your financial future at the expense of our relationship. I was trying to protect both. You were trying to have it both ways. You wanted to keep me just happy enough that I wouldn't leave, while keeping your mother just satisfied enough that she wouldn't disinherit you. And you know what? It almost worked. I almost convinced myself that your lack of support was just a personality quirk, that Margaret's hostility was something I had to endure for the sake of family harmony. David buried his face in his hands. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I know I've been weak. Weak isn't the right word, David. Weak would be if you'd tried to stand up for me and failed. What you did was calculated. You made a series of conscious choices to prioritize money over marriage, and I was just collateral damage. What can I do? How can I fix this? I looked at this man who had been my husband for 5 years, who I'd loved and trusted and built a life with, and I realized that the person I'd thought I'd married had never really existed. The David I'd fallen in love with had been a projection, a fantasy I'd created to explain away behavior that should have been unacceptable from the beginning. You can't fix this, David. Some things once broken can't be repaired. So that's it? 5 years of marriage and you're just walking away? I'm not walking away from 5 years of marriage. I'm walking away from 5 years of being treated like a subsidiary to your real life. I'm walking away from a relationship where my worth was constantly being negotiated based on how much inconvenience I caused your mother. I went inside and started gathering my things, the motions automatic despite the emotional turmoil. David followed me, watching helplessly as I packed. Where will you go? He asked. To Jessica's initially. Then I'll start making arrangements for the move to San Francisco. The job offer is real, very real, and it's exactly the kind of opportunity I've been dreaming of. I paused in my packing. It's funny, isn't it? Your mother was so worried about my career making me too independent, but her attempts to control me are what's actually giving me the freedom to leave. Sarah, please, can't we try counseling first? Can't we work on this? David, counseling only works if both people are committed to change, and you've spent 5 years proving that you're not willing to change anything that might cost you your mother's approval or your inheritance. I could give up the inheritance could you really? Because you've had 5 years to choose me over your mother's money, and you never did it once. He had no answer for that, because we both knew it was true. I finished packing my essentials and called the concierge to arrange for my bags to be sent ahead. Then I stood in the doorway of our suite, looking at David one last time. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said. "I hope your mother's approval and your family's money bring you the happiness that our marriage couldn't." "Sarah, wait." But I was already walking away, down the hall toward the elevator that would take me away from this life and toward whatever came next. In the lobby, I found James Morrison checking out at the front desk. He saw me with my bags and raised an eyebrow. "Leaving early?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. "James, about that job offer. I'm very interested in discussing it further." His face lit up. "Excellent. Should I have my assistant call you this week?" "Actually, I'll be in San Francisco by Wednesday if you'd like to meet in person." "Even better. I think you're going to love the Bay Area, Sarah. It's a place where people appreciate innovation and talent." "That sounds perfect." As I waited for my taxi, I pulled out my phone and called Dr. Walsh. "Sarah, I was hoping to hear from you. Have you given any thought to our conversation?" "I have, and I'd like to accept your offer. When would you like me to start?" "Are you serious? That's wonderful. How soon can you relocate?" "I can be there by the end of the week." "That's incredible. I'll start working on the contract immediately. Sarah, I think this is going to be the beginning of something extraordinary." As my taxi pulled up to take me away from the hotel, away from David, away from the life I'd been trying so hard to fit into, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: excitement about the future. For the first time in my adult life, I was making choices based on what I wanted rather than what other people expected of me. For the first time, I was moving towards something rather than away from it. 6 months later, I was standing in my new office in downtown San Francisco, looking out at the bay through floor-to-ceiling windows. My business had grown beyond anything I'd imagined possible. Dr. Walsh's green technology initiative had led to contracts with 3 other major companies, and my reputation in the Bay Area was growing rapidly. I'd just finished planning a product launch that had been featured in TechCrunch as the most innovative corporate event of the year. The success felt different this time, cleaner somehow, without the constant undercurrent of having to justify my accomplishments to people who were determined not to value them. My phone rang, and I was surprised to see David's name on the screen. We'd barely spoken since I'd left Napa, communicating mostly through lawyers as we worked out the divorce settlement. "Hello, David," I said, curious about what had prompted the call. "Hi, Sarah. I hope I'm not bothering you. I know you're busy with your new life. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to congratulate you. I saw the article about your company in the Chronicle. It sounds like you're doing incredible work out there." "Thank you. The opportunity has been everything I hoped it would be." I also wanted to apologize again. I've been in therapy trying to understand how I let things get so bad between us. My therapist has helped me see how wrong I was, how much I hurt you. I appreciated the acknowledgement, but it felt like too little too late. I'm glad you're getting help, David. You deserve to be happy. So do you, and it sounds like you are. I am, very much so. I miss you, he said quietly. I miss us. I miss the US we could have been, I said honestly. But I don't miss the US we actually were. Fair enough. He paused. For what it's worth, I broke things off with my mother. Told her that her behavior toward you was unacceptable and that I wouldn't tolerate it anymore. She cut me out of the trust, just like she threatened. I'm sorry, David. I know that wasn't easy. It was actually easier than I thought it would be. Turns out my self-respect is worth more than her money. I'm proud of you for that. Too late to matter, though. It's not too late to matter. It just doesn't change what happened between us. After we hung up, I stood at my window watching the sunset paint the bay in shades of gold and orange. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, trying so hard to be acceptable to people who were determined not to accept me. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone I'd known briefly but never really understood. My assistant knocked on my door. Sarah, your 7 o'clock is here. I turned away from the window, back to the life I'd built for myself, the life where my voice mattered and my dreams had space to grow. Send them in, I said. I'm ready. And for the first time in years, I truly was.